Late evening, an ordinary apartment. The kettle has already boiled, the light in the room is soft, and beyond the window the city hums peacefully. Someone close to you is laughing in the kitchen, someone is scrolling through the news, someone is simply living through this quiet, unremarkable evening. And then suddenly a door slams outside, too sharply, too loudly, and in that exact second, one person in the room seems to change completely. The shoulders tighten, the gaze hardens, the body tenses before the mind even has time to think. He does not scream. He does not collapse. He does not do anything people usually call a breakdown. But inside, the main thing has already happened. For a moment, the nervous system stops living in a peaceful apartment and returns to the place where relaxing was dangerous. Usually from the outside, people explain it simply. They say he just became nervous, or he has a difficult personality, or he cannot let go of the past, or he overthinks everything, or he likes to dramatize. It is a convenient explanation, ordinary, almost comforting. Because if you call it just a strange habit, then you do not have to look deeper. You do not have to admit that some things do not end on the day the shooting stops. They just stop being visible. And this matters to understand right away. When a person has survived combat, it is often not only memory that changes. The way safety is felt changes, the way the world is read changes, the way silence, people, the future, and even the self are trusted changes. And what from the outside looks like coldness, irritability, distrust, or excessive control is often, inside, the trace of a very costly adaptation. An adaptation that once saved a life, and then could no longer simply switch itself off. Today we're going to talk about 6 hidden traits that often remain in people after war, not in order to pity them, and not in order to label them, but in order to finally see the psychological truth that almost no one knows how to name out loud. If this topic speaks to you, support this video and subscribe, and let us go deeper. The first hidden trait is vigilance that became character. There are people others describe as simply too tense, too alert, too aware. They notice too much. They watch everything around them too closely. They react too sharply to a sudden sound, to movement behind them, to another person's tone of voice, to a change in the air. From the outside, it looks like excessive nervousness, but the psyche rarely does anything for no reason. When a person has lived for a long time in conditions where danger could come from the smallest detail, the brain begins to learn faster than consciousness. It rewires perception so that threat is noticed even before it becomes obvious. Researchers of trauma have written a great deal about this. After extreme experience, the nervous system can seem to get stuck in a mode where the world constantly demands checking. Not because the person wants to be tense, but because relaxation once became a luxury that could cost far too much. Imagine an ordinary day, you walk into a cafe. Most people look for a free table, but someone else first notices the entrance, the windows, the corners of the room, who is sitting where, who is louder, where the narrow passage is, where the dead end might be. He does not plan to do it. It happens almost automatically, and if you ask him why he sat exactly there, sometimes he will not even be able to answer right away. It just feels calmer there. It is simply easier for the body to argue less with reality. From the outside, it looks like paranoia. But the truth is different. This is not a love of control. It is bodily memory, which once learned to survive through constant scanning of the world. The only problem is that such readiness comes at a cost. A person becomes exhausted even in places where others rest. He comes home tired not only from the day itself, but from endless inner duty. And the main point here is simple. When danger has been real for too long, vigilance stops being a reaction and becomes a personality. And from this trait, the next one grows naturally. Because if you are always on guard, very soon not only your attention changes, but your relationship to peace itself changes. The second hidden trait is distrust of silence. For most people, silence is relief. For someone who has lived through combat, silence can sound different. It may not soothe, but unsettle. Because in some conditions, the worst did not happen during the noise, but right before it. Before the strike, before the command, before the news, after which life could no longer continue in the same way as 1 minute earlier. Psychologically, this is a powerful shift. Safety no longer feels like something natural. It begins to feel either temporary or suspicious, as if the world has only paused before the next blow. You sit in a room, everything is fine, no one is shouting, nothing is happening. But inside there is no calm. Inside there is a question. Why is it too quiet? Because of this, A person may struggle to tolerate the ordinary ease with which other people relax in peaceful life. Someone falls asleep easily with a film playing. Someone forgets to lock the door. Someone lives without a plan for tomorrow and feels free. And nearby sits a person for whom such lightness sounds almost like defenselessness. Not because he wants to control everyone, but because his inner map of the world no longer matches the map most people live by. From the outside, this is often mistaken for gloominess, for an inability to enjoy life, for constantly expecting something bad. But sometimes behind it there is not coldness, but shattered trust in the very idea that life can be peaceful without a hidden cost. And there is enormous exhaustion in that, because when you cannot believe in silence, you end up alone against a world that seems peaceful, but still feels as if it has not lowered its aim. Sometimes a person is not afraid of noise, he is afraid of what comes before it. And when silence stops feeling like home, the psyche begins to do something else. It learns to live not in the present, but one step ahead of disaster. The third hidden trait is the habit of expecting the worst. People often call this negative thinking, pessimism, dark imagination. But in a person who has survived war, expecting the worst was often not a distortion of thought, but the most accurate form of reality. More than once he learned that the worst possible scenario was not merely possible. Sometimes it arrived without warning, and the brain draws a conclusion that later becomes very difficult to cancel. If you imagine the terrible thing in advance, then at least the blow will not be completely blind. That is why such a person may constantly run through possibilities. What if the late-night phone call is not random? What if someone close has been silent for too long? What if this conversation ends badly? What if everything starts collapsing again faster than anyone can understand? To people around him, this looks like exhausting overthinking, but inside it has its own logic. It is an attempt to recover at least the illusion of control over chaos. In daily life, this appears almost invisibly. The person checks the route in advance, keeps reserves, does not like depending on others, always thinks about the exit, carries more than necessary, starts worrying before anything has even happened. It is as if he lives in two worlds at once, the one that is happening now and the one that could suddenly go wrong. The painful truth of this trait is that it really does help sometimes. Such people often gather themselves faster, react faster, notice the approaching problem faster. And that is exactly why it is so hard to let go of it. Because the psyche does not see it as an enemy, but as an old rescuer. Only a rescuer who is always present does not let you sleep. This is not simply expecting the worst. It is experience that once proved to a person that carelessness can cost far too much. But if inside you always have to be ready for impact, then feelings are left with almost no right to move freely. And then the next trait appears. The fourth hidden trait is emotional armor. Some people after war seem almost impenetrable. Their voice may remain steady even where another person's would tremble. They rarely complain. They say little. They hardly show fear, pain, or confusion. Some see strength in that. Others, on the contrary, think they are cold. But very often this is not the absence of feeling. It is a way of preventing feelings from drowning you. There is an important idea that Bessel van der Kolk wrote about. Trauma does not always scream. Sometimes it does the opposite and makes a person internally mute. Because if the pain is too great, the psyche does not fully process it, but seems to preserve it in sealed form. And then, from the outside, the person looks composed, while inside he lives in a constant mode of restraint. Imagine a moment when someone nearby is crying, and he does not know how to come closer. Not because he does not care, but because he knows too well the cost of emotions that get out of control, or another moment. Someone asks him how he is, and he says fine, even if inside there is an entire basement full of tension, because once he learned the main rule of survival. Hold yourself together first, you will feel it later. Only for many people, that later never truly comes. From the outside, such armor looks like courage, and in a way that is true, but it is courage with a very high price. When you live in armor for too long, it protects you not only from pain, it also begins to protect you from closeness, from warmth, and from the ability to feel alive beside the people who love you. Sometimes coldness is not the absence of a heart. It is a heart that survived under fire for too long. And when feelings have to be restrained all the time, the body begins carrying what the psyche cannot finish processing. And then the next mechanism begins. The fifth hidden trait is the inability to truly relax. There are people who are not fully at home even when they are at home. They may sit in a chair, look out the window, drink tea, listen to a conversation, but inside they do not release a single thread of tension. Their sleep is shallow, their rest is broken, their muscles seem to remember what the mind is already too tired to explain. They go to bed, yet the body somehow remains on duty. This is not a whim, and not dramatization. After prolonged stress, the nervous system can become so accustomed to heightened tension that a calm state begins to feel almost alien, sometimes even dangerous, as if the moment you truly let go of control is exactly when something will happen. This is where the things others struggle to understand come from. Why the person does not like being approached unexpectedly, why he is irritated by small things, why he cannot switch off during rest, why after a celebration he looks as if he survived not enjoyment, but a difficult shift, why it is easier for him to stay busy than to simply be at peace. And here there is a cruel paradox. Many people dream of finally resting, but when rest comes they cannot enter it. Because the war ended long ago outside, but inside the command all clear never sounded. And this does not make a person weak. It makes him a system that worked at the limit for too long and no longer remembers how to live without a background of tension. The most exhausting tension is not the one everyone notices. It is the one a person wears like a second skin. And when you live in this mode for too long, not only the body and emotional reaction change, the entire picture of the world changes. And this is perhaps the quietest and deepest trait of all. The sixth hidden trait is the feeling that the old world is gone. After combat, a person can return home, to the city, to the family, to familiar streets, to ordinary conversations, to shops, to transport, to a life that seems to continue. But inside, a terrible discovery often waits. Returning to the old self is impossible. The world may remain outwardly the same, but inwardly it no longer matches the way it once felt. The same colours, the same words, the same people, but the support beneath them is gone. This is very hard to explain to those who have never lived through the destruction of ordinary reality. Because for most people, the world still feels like a place where terrible things happen, somewhere far away, to someone else, not here, not now. But for someone who has seen how quickly normal life can collapse, that innocence no longer exists. He can no longer unknow what he knows, and from this comes a strange sense of alienation. When everyone around you talks about small things, and you cannot escape the feeling that an invisible wall stands between you. When you have supposedly been returned to ordinary life, but no one has returned to you your former way of feeling life. You can laugh, work, talk, continue living, but you cannot become who you were before. From the outside, this can look like withdrawal, cynicism, or even arrogance. But very often behind it there is not contempt for people. There is simply the deep loneliness of a person who has seen too much of the world and can no longer pretend otherwise. And there is a special heaviness in that, because you go on living among those who say everything is fine, while inside you forever carry the knowledge of how fragile that fine really is. Some people do not lose faith in the world, they lose the right to believe in it with the same carelessness as before. And now look at all of this together. Constant vigilance, distrust of silence, the habit of expecting the worst, emotional armour, the inability to truly relax, and that silent feeling that the old world is gone. This is not just a collection of strange traits. It is not a bad personality, not weakness, not a broken psyche in the crude and superficial sense. It is a map of the inner world of a person who lived too long in a place where reality rewrites personality without permission. Yes, these traits have a price. They take away lightness, they interfere with closeness, they exhaust, they can make a person difficult both for himself and for those nearby. But if you look deeper, there is not only pain in them, there is also the trace of immense survival work, the trace of a psyche that did everything it could to get a person to this day, even if the method that once saved him now hurts him. So when you see such a person, do not rush to say that he simply became different. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say something else. He did not become worse, he became more complex than it is comfortable for others to understand. And if you recognized yourself in this video, remember the main thing. What remained in you after war is not always damage. Sometimes it is a form of memory, sometimes it is the price of survival, sometimes it is armor that has grown too tightly into the skin. And the path forward begins not where you force yourself to become who you were before, but where you first honestly admit that you will never again be who you were. because the deepest wounds of war often do not bleed. They simply teach a person to live as if even a peaceful day still has to be survived.